So, amongst the many Sonic characters that exist out there, there has been one that may have been forgotten and lost due to multiple circumstances, which I'm not going to get into that here. I'm more so talking about the character and their history and what they stand for and what I decided to do with their character that is different and puts them on a very unexpected arc. But to give a little rundown, Scourge was not always called Scourge. He used to be called Evil Sonic, and he was this Sonic that was introduced in the Archie comics as basically an introduction to the multiverse, an anti-universe, where basically what that means is everyone in that universe is the exact opposite of who they are in the universe we've come to know and love. So Eggman is actually a good guy, and Sonic and all of his friends are actually the bad guys. And it's just a complete flip of what you would expect. And so a character like that, in my opinion, can get a little boring. I think the way they wrote him was fun, and there was a lot of interesting things you could do with that version of the character, but I always felt like, shouldn't Sonic be so pure of heart that even the most evil version of him in the multiverse would have some semblance of good? There could be some way to transform him, like he's not locked to just being this evil character. And I know it goes against the purpose of an anti-universe, of everything being the opposite. It's like, well, now you're just turning him into another Sonic. But that is exactly what I wanted to avoid, is just having another Sonic who has a darker past but ends up becoming the same character. What I wanted to do was introduce my own unique version of what I would have liked to see from this character. So first of all, the voice. I've gotten lots of comments on videos I've done, clips I've uploaded from the show, and YouTube shorts of like, that is a very strange voice to choose for that character, and it's not what I had in my head. Well, I'm right there with you, because it's not what I had in my head either when I was reading the Archie comics that featured the character. I very much so created the voice first a long time ago and just decided to pull it out and use it for this character because I thought it would be a good fit. It subverts expectations, but that wasn't exactly my intent with choosing the voice. It was just more so I really wanted to inject this already existing character that I've created into a Sonic character. I just didn't know which one would make the most sense. And seeing as how Scourge is very underutilized, and also on top of that, he's never had a voice that's been very definitive that everybody agrees on, you know, and so I found an opportunity of freedom to just inject whatever character and whatever voice I wanted to put in there. So I went with a character that I had created in my high school years, and it was basically an inside joke with my friends. It was like a mixture of the Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker to be precise, and a few other voices mixed in there, and my own sort of touch. And what started as an impression of Heath Ledger's Joker became something else entirely. And just to be clear, you know, what I'm doing with Scourge is not traditional. It's not the way you should voice a character. I can't even really explain how I do it. He just sort of sounds like this, and there's a lot of rah. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of ah. And it's not like I wanted that or I intended that. It's just what comes out when I do that character, and no other voice I do is that wacky and that. I would assume that's harmful to the voice, but I have not had any problems so far voicing the character on and off for like almost 10 years now. I've been doing that voice, and so it went from an okay impression, because let's be honest, my voice is nowhere near as deep and luscious as Heath Ledger's, so I can't do those little intricate raspy sounds when doing that voice, but I feel like I had nailed down the cadence and the voice, and I just decided this is a fitting voice for this character. Not that he's anything like the Joker, but that there is an unpredictable nature to that voice of like,
You never know where it's gonna go. He's always over there, or he's up here, or he's down there, and it's just all over the place, and why is it that it's always me?
You know, he's... You hear that voice, it just brings you into an unpredictable place where you never know where he's gonna go next. And of course, it's hard for me to experience that. This is just what I've been told. And I think what makes this voice and this character so fun to watch and just so unpredictable. And I made a poll asking all of you guys what you thought. And it seems like he is the #1 character that people want to see in my show. He is the most enjoyable to watch on screen. And that I was not expecting. I was like, I thought it was gonna be like Sonic or Shadow, but no, it was Scourge, and I was very shocked. But I kind of understood it at the same time. So, all in all, that's how I decided on the voice. I already had this character that I had created, this inside joke with my friends, and I was like, let's bring everyone in on the joke, you know, and let's make this a character. And it was a decision that was made knowing that I could make some really funny moments and that this character could create some levity in all the darkness that I was doing with the storytelling, and it would just create this really nice shift in tone whenever he was on screen that would be a nice break from everything else going on. And, you know, not that other characters can't be funny. You know, this is something actually I should remind myself and keep in mind for the future, that other characters should be able to say off-the-wall things and within context and within reason, but Scourge will always be just the most oddball character in the entire show, and that was my intention, I have to say. Now, moving on from the voice and how I sort of created the baseline of his character, I want to get more into his arc, the arc that this character goes on throughout the show, and how he affects the other characters. And so, again, going back to the subversion of expectation, you think he's just this villain who's still a villain who's disguising himself as, oh, I've changed and I'm here to help, but really he was going to be working with Eggman, or he was going to join Mecha Sonic, or he was going to turn on them and have his own plan. But none of that ever happened. It's like you're kind of waiting for him to just turn around and be this villain that you expect him to be, but he never does. And in fact, it goes the opposite direction. The first scene that sort of highlights this is in episode 2, because all throughout episode 1, he's just annoying the characters, he's bullying them, he's making fun of them, he's not taking anything seriously. But you can tell this is some sort of defense mechanism. Like he's trying to protect himself with all these jokes and with all these jabs he takes at others. It's really just masking some insecurity and some feelings that he doesn't want to show. And also that he's unsure of this new change in his life. And so by episode 2, spoiler alert, after Sonic dies, he is the only one there with Shadow at the moment, and Shadow is in complete shock, losing his best friend. It takes him back to losing Maria, which is something he hasn't thought about in a while, and he feels like a failure. He feels like, how could I be the ultimate life form? Even if that is just a title, like, I should have been able to do something. I froze. I was shocked. I didn't see it coming. I thought we had won. I was such a fool, you know, and I can't protect my friends. I can't protect anyone. I don't know what Eggman has unleashed on the world, but this is a new threat that we have never faced before. It's some sort of physical threat that Shadow has never felt. He's never felt that threatened by a villain in anything. Even Mephiles was not that much of a physical threat. He was a mental threat, but Shadow had already fortified his mind at that point so that no one could try and tell him who he is, which was the whole plot of Shadow the Hedgehog, was everyone trying to tell him who he is, but he decides, you know? And so Mephiles couldn't corrupt him, and which I'm sure was frustrating for Mephiles, but because that's like his #1 tactic. But so yeah, in that moment, Shadow's very just lost, is feeling all these things. The visual in that moment of Shadow in his super form lying against a tree in complete shock is like a character that's already powerful at his most powerful, but is feeling completely hopeless. We've never seen that in any official media, from what I know. Usually when a character's in their super form, they're on top, they feel like they can do anything. So the intention of that was to really highlight how deeply Shadow is feeling these things. So Scourge has to step up. He sees this and he's almost sort of like, man, I always looked up to you. You know, I always thought you were so cool and that you were so incorruptible and that you didn't care. Like, you can tell that Scourge really doesn't understand Shadow in that moment, but it kind of works out in his favor, his misunderstanding of who Shadow is. It's like, oh, I've heard all these things about you doing all these evil things. How could this affect you so deeply? Like, and what he doesn't understand is Shadow is a very emotional creature, and that's actually what drives him to do all those heinous things he did in his past, it's driven from an emotional place, whereas Scourge, it was driven from a selfish place, a place of, this is the only life I've ever known, so this is normal to me, right? That's kind of the difference between their characters. Scourge is nowhere near as emotional as Shadow. And so Scourge is trying to remind him, like, hey, you're the ultimate life form. Why does this bother you? Like, come on, like, get up, pick yourself up, let's go back out there and let's fight. At first, Shadow is like, can you just try and understand what I just lost? And Scourge is sort of like, oh, right. So right there, they learn something about each other and they form an understanding. So Scourge, from a place of complete sincerity, not trying to manipulate or anything like that, just picking him up and getting him back into the fight because that's what Sonic would have wanted, that right there shows growth. I think that was like the first moment that I had written, and I didn't really appreciate what I had written until like the past year or two. I started to realize, like, hey, you know what? Like, Doomsday as a whole was very rough around the edges, and I wasn't really like trying my hardest, and like my equipment wasn't the best, my animation wasn't the best. Like, there were a lot of things that were lacking about Doomsday, and it's really hard for me to look back at it without judging. But there were some scenes I really liked, the writing and the symbolism and the way everything was done. And so that scene in particular, the reason I'm going so into depth with that is because it is such an important part of Scourge's character, and I think paves the way for him going into the future with what kind of character he's going to become ultimately. And you see that continuing through Cybernetics, and of course Revolution as well. You see his character continually grow, and when he meets Miles again in Revolution, he has to confront his friend and tell him why he just left without saying anything, why he abandoned him. Because Miles has no idea. Miles has his own idea of who Scourge is, right? And this there's a lot of parallels between Shadow and Scourge and Fang in the sense that they all have a past of knowing one way of life and thinking that there's no other way, thinking that nobody cares about them, thinking about the things they've lost. They have a lot of similarities and parallels between their characters. Bark as well, of having this past, but then growing and changing and realizing that you want more out of life. And I feel like Scourge, that's what I wanted to do with his character, was like highlight that he has changed over all these years. And he didn't even bother explaining to his suppression squad because he knew they wouldn't understand, and that's exactly what happened, is that it turns out they were much more far gone than he was, and he got out just at the right time. Now, writing a character like that is very complex, and I definitely took some inspiration from Negan from The Walking Dead, a character that started out doing very evil acts, but then you come to understand a little bit why he did those things via flashbacks and just also character development. I feel like Scourge, we haven't gotten to see a lot of flashbacks with him, which is going to change in the future. We've only gotten, like, Scourge was describing things to Miles. We got some screenshots of like some of the things they had done and that they were doing at the time. And Scourge is not necessarily someone who is like Sonic, who is against killing and thinks that if they could avoid it, they should, right? But he's not like Shadow either, that's more open to it and sort of like, well, if that's what's going to save the world, if that's what needs to be done, we should do that. I think maybe in some scenarios he may care less than even Shadow does about killing. Like it's more of like he doesn't really have, like I said, as much emotion as Shadow, and so therefore I feel like he's a little more lenient on it. But there are also times where he could be much softer and much more understanding and careless in the other direction that allows him to realize maybe I shouldn't kill. So there's two things going on there, two different directions he can sway, but either direction is pretty extreme. It's kind of weird. Putting him on an arc where he starts already on a path of redemption, but he's just at the beginning of that path. He's just started that path. And that's where I wanted to start his story, because I thought that would be interesting. Instead of starting him from a complete villain, we leave some things up to interpretation and we allow the imagination to fill the gaps of what was his past like with the Suppression Squad? Before he even came to this universe, what was his life like then? You know, all these questions. I sort of realized I don't have to answer those right now. I think what's important is that I started him at a very low place. He was at such a low point that he had to go on this path of redemption. There was no other choice in his mind, right? He had to abandon what he thought were his friends, but then he quickly realizes that whatever friendship he thought he had with Miles, for example, did not exist. You know, Miles is not on his side, clearly. He didn't even attempt to understand. He was very much just like, oh, that nobody that you killed, like you feel bad about that. Oh, you feel bad about our actions. Oh, you wanted something different out of your life. I don't understand. You had everything. We could have done anything and all this, you know. So, and the idea is that any universe you go to, there is no such thing as a completely evil Sonic, right? The only thing that's closest to that is Fleetway, and he's an entirely different entity when it comes to his character, and he is more so pure evil, where I think pure evil is not necessarily possible. I think you can get pretty close, but I feel like this is controversial to maybe say, for a character like Scourge who has killed, you know, there shouldn't really be forgiveness, right? For some of the things that he's done. It's not about forgiveness. I think it's about maybe forgiveness of himself, and also I think it's about what he chooses to do going forward, because that's all you can really do is control the present and learn from your past, and he is choosing a better path for himself. I guess that's what I wanted to do with his character, was put him on a redemption arc and see where that takes him, and just sort of transform his character while keeping his cool factor, or at least attempting to, because I know giving him a voice like that, it's like, how do you justify that character being a cool character? You know, look at his design and then look at his voice. But it works. There's something about it that it works. If it didn't work, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have chosen that voice or given him this different characterization, you know? He's changed a lot from Doomsday all the way to Cybernetics, you know, and he still has more changing to do. And I think going into Aftermath, there's going to be just so much to explore. It's going to be a blast. I put a lot of thought into him in particular when I didn't really have to. Did I do everything perfectly? No. I mean, I've accepted a long time ago that this show was never going to be perfect in any aspect, you know? But as long as it does its job, it functions, it tells the story, you know? And I feel like it accomplished what I wanted to do. Maybe not every animation I do is perfect, you know? Maybe not every line of dialogue I come up with or I write down is going to be perfect, but it conveys the idea I had in my head, so therefore I see it as a success, and I'm only getting better with how I write these characters and where I choose to go with their arc. I feel like I'm always coming up with better and better ideas as I go. But yeah, Doomsday was tough because I had really written myself not into a corner, but close. Like it's such a weird story looking back. Like it's super weird. It's not traditional in any sense. It's just a very strange story that gets very personal for the characters, and in such a dark time they have to find ways to pick themselves back up and keep fighting amidst all the things that they're already dealing with before any of this even happened. And then this on top of that, it's like there's many layers to what's going on with these characters personally, you know. Doomsday was a very tough time. It matches because it was made during a tough time of my life. So Revolution as well, I think Doomsday especially. Yeah. Looking back at some of those episodes from time to time, I'm glad that I chose to tell the story that I did. And I think overall, Scourge will be one of my favorite characters for the entire show, just because he's so much fun to write for, he's so much fun to voice act, and he's also so much fun to create more character development for, you know, like to further his development. And I'm still figuring things out for those like future arcs, but from what I have planned right now even, I'm very excited for where things can go with him, because it can go a couple of different ways. But I understand that, you know, I should do more things like this with those characters that don't have voices, is just take a chance. Take a leap of faith and just do something unexpected, because you'll be surprised what voices end up matching the way a character looks. That voice coming out of that character, as I've said throughout this entire video, I understand is jarring and bizarre, and a lot of people won't feel that that fits. but to me, there's something about it that works. Now, to end off this video, because it is getting pretty long and I talked about a lot of different things, I do just want to end off a YouTube comment that very elegantly described who Scourge is, and I just really loved this comment, and I think about it from time to time, and it's so amazing to have a community that really understands like what I'm trying to do with these characters and what I'm trying to do with these stories overall. I appreciate you guys taking the time to check out my show and watch it all the way through, even though Doomsday is rough, as I've said. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you guys are enjoying the story and you are seeing the improvement, and it's just so exciting to know personally where things go, and I just can't wait to bring that to reality. It's gonna feel great one day when I am finished and the ending is out there and my story will be completed. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys. I know January has been a little bit slow, but bear with me. I got some more content in the works, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, creators.